Matt Maher, welcome to the Katie McGrady Show.
Good morning, Katie. Thanks
It's
for having me.
always great to have you. It's always great to get you on. What have you been up to? Where have you been? I know you've been on tour with a man with a broken leg. How has that gone recently?
He's actually doing really good. Yeah, I've been touring with David Crowder and Zach Williams. And Crowder, of course, has all of a sudden made hover rounds cool. He's got a little Smokey and the Bandit sticker on either side and a microphone stand built in. He's showed me all the tricks he can do on his,
So
which is
folks
pretty
know
fun.
David Crowder, who is a very well-known Christian musician. I don't even know how he broke his leg.
So he was at he has like he was at a lake house and
Okay.
he was basically walking on pine straw and slipped and broke his leg in 3 places.
Oh my gosh.
Like kind of like sort of like really that's like
That's how you did it?
you're almost embarrassed to tell people, yeah, like
Yeah.
I was just existing in the universe and then my leg broke in 3 places. So yeah, I think it was a very humbling experience, but he's recovered and he seems to be doing great.
And
And
this was all like right around Forrest Frank breaking his back. They
it
came out
was
with
over the summer. Yeah.
yeah, they came out with a song together that my kids think is about St. Peter. I don't know if Crowder and Forrest Frank know that, but my kids think Standing on the Rock is about the Pope. So
That's amazing.
there's some great evangelization happening there, whether they realize it or not. So you're on tour with them, but you've got another tour kicking off, which I think we Catholics are going to be super pumped about. In our most beautiful places of worship, tell us a little bit of the history behind the Cathedrals tour and why this one's really close to your heart.
Yeah, for sure. So Sarah Kroger is a good friend, and her and I for years, we both live in Nashville. We're sort of in the same kind of community, small group. And we've sort of talked on and off for years about the idea of, man, wouldn't it be great to do specifically a tour to kind of gather people back into these kind of older sacred spaces like cathedrals, do a more kind of do a worship an acoustic worship night where the sort of the building itself kind of dictates the way in which you approach the music that you play.
Mm.
It's I always say the cathedral is sort of like it's the fifth Beatle. It's the other instrument. Because it's sort of I sort of asked myself if this cathedral had a voice, what would it sound like?
Mm.
And so that's how it started. And then we did the first year last year, and really what it changed for me was it's specifically this tour's been during the season of Advent, which historically has been a penitential season. So it's an opportunity just to kind of help people slow down and be more reflective and not so much get caught up in a worldly hamster wheel of busyness. But really, it's like, how do we wind down almost in some ways to celebrate the Feast of the Incarnation at Christmas? So it sort of had this dual function of going, this is a great way to help people prepare for Advent. But then I think the other thing is, which I think is really important, is that cathedrals are where the seat of the bishop is. So in every diocese, it's the central point of the tradition and the authority of the church. And so there's really an opportunity to kind of gather people back around that, to say, how do we come back together as Catholics?
Mm.
Because I think so we experience now more than ever before, particularly with the internet, is we're sort of living in a science experiment that's, trying to separate people by outrage and, division and, as my kids would say, people crashing out on the internet. And so there's something really beautiful about, in a humble, prayerful way of saying, we're going to draw back together around the seat of the bishop.
I love that because there is, I think, the fracturing certainly inside Holy Mother Church, but it's also, I mean, I'll just
in society.
Just in society, but like it's a chance for us as Catholics to also say like, hey, like come see what we're all about. Because I'm sure you're going to get a lot of non-Catholics saying, oh, I'll go to the Matt Maher concert. I'll go to the Sarah Kroger concert. And then they get to walk into our most beautiful church.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it, where you have people who, I remember last year when we were in Detroit in Blessed Sacrament Cathedral, and it was neat too, is that, the people, the teams that usually run these cathedrals, that run these buildings, they're sort of kind of set apart. They're their own kind of class of people because they are worrying about things like historical society overlays and Now because we're getting up in age, they're worrying about how do we preserve these? How do we raise money to, you can't just repair a roof. You can't just call a roofing company when you're like, hey, I got a cathedral. I need some new shingles. It's like, becomes much more complex. And so the neat thing was, as we started going into some of these spaces and sort of interacting with the staff, when they would see people from all over their diocese coming in, Catholics and non-Catholics, it was sort of this kind of encouragement to them to keep showing up and keep doing what they're doing. And I mean, the Detroit night was so special too because they had this reliquary in the sacristy. It was like 150 relics.
Crazy.
And there was a bunch that were sort of on tour, which I was like, relics? I knew that, but I never, it's not something I'm actually thinking of, like, oh, like, St. Therese, the Little Flowers on a
She's on
national
tour right now.
tour.
She was
She's
just
on tour right now.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's crazy. She was just in Lafayette, and I was able to swing by
yes.
the church, and it's like, hey, let's get coffee, St. Therese. It
Yeah,
was wild.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think there's an opportunity to, like you said, I think it's a soft form of evangelization where the cathedral itself draws people in. It
Hmm.
was built that way. It was built to point to elevate your gaze upward. You know what I mean? And not just physically, but I think interiorly as well.
Yeah. We went to the cathedral in our diocese for mass this past Sunday, purely because their mass is 9:30, not 9, and I needed like an extra half hour of sleep. And walked in and then realized it was the feast of the dedication of the Basilica of St. John Lateran, which is the Pope's cathedral. And it's like, oh,
Yes.
that worked out. Go to your cathedral on the same day that we remember the Pope's cathedral. And it actually kind of ended up being everybody in town was at the cathedral that isn't normally there. I think the Lord
Mm,
just kind of arranged for it. And I sat in our cathedral. My parents are married in our cathedral. It's gorgeous. It was restored after Hurricane Laura and Hurricane Delta. We had a lot of influx of funding to be able to restore it. And it is, you feel like you're in a different part of the church
mm,
because you're surrounded by, I won't say that extra, because every church is beautiful and every church has its beautiful elements, but there's something about knowing this is where my bishop teaches from.
mhm.
They've put in a little extra effort, I think, in making sure that things are kept up to snuff. Of all of the places y'all went last year, do you have a favorite? And do you have one you're really looking forward to going to this year? Because is it almost double the number of places y'all are going this year? The tour is much
Yes.
larger this year.
Yeah. So we did it the first year and it was a great, it was a great success. And then it doubled in size, which is awesome because I think this is something that we would love to sort of see happen, just more people kind of gathering in the space like what you said. I think there's something about the intentionality of the architecture and the construction to remind people that when we gather as Catholics for the holy sacrifice in the mass, like we don't take lightly the fact that it's the thinnest space in the
Mm-hmm.
universe between heaven and earth. And so it's trying to remind people like that like there is a very real supernatural reality of sort of what's happening in the midst of like, babies crying and shoving goldfish in their mouth and people coming in late and people still having the concerns of their life. But it's sort of this beautiful kind of collision of it. I think last year, the one that surprised me the most was Toledo because I was like, holy Toledo, Batman.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a pretty
it's
church.
it's the beautiful cathedral, and it's once again, I think the thing I'm very cognizant of too is that these were built like by the faithful. It
Mm.
wasn't some outside like we're just going to hire some big construction company and like those people may or may not. Like a lot of these cathedrals, like it's represents truly the handiwork of the faithful coming together, sometimes multi-generational. You know what I mean? Like, especially you go to Europe, you look at like a cathedral like in Cologne, it's like the idea of like a stonemason who's a Catholic is working his whole life, literally hands his hammer to his son. He passes away and his son continues the work. And so I think it becomes this real great allegory for just the mission work of evangelization of building up the body of Christ. I'm really excited. We're actually going to, I think it's Cathedral of the Holy Cross in Boston.
Mm. Great church.
Yes.
So good.
So I'm really looking forward. I'm really,
And okay, so the Boston Cathedral, which was fundraised by a pretty intense, you should look up the Boston bishop. He's got kind of a wild historical story. I tell his story on the show all the time.
Really?
He's a really cool figure in American Catholicism, but he fundraised a lot of that cathedral by basically shaming all the anti-Catholic Protestants into donating, saying like, we're working hard in this new America, and so you need to so it was largely built by donors who weren't Catholic. So it's
Wow.
kind of a cool, I absolutely, and it's, I love early American history. Yeah, look that guy up. It's a pretty cool story. That's a really awesome one. I'm excited you guys are going to, like, I think people forget every diocese has a cathedral. Most people aren't thinking about Chester Springs, Pennsylvania, or Columbus, Georgia.
Yeah.
I love that it's not just the biggies. I mean, it could be the biggies. I'd love to see St. Patrick's on this next year.
Well, so and honestly, the Archdiocese of New York they've been incredibly encouraging. And the challenge with a place like the Archdiocese of like with New York is there's so many people that come in and out in the course of a day.
Yeah,
You really don't have time to set up.
that's true. Yeah, you
So
can't like shut the doors.
no, you can't be like, sorry, we need to have a sound check. It's just sort of like, so, we sort of talked about, well, do we just try to do like one of those like pop up, like
You could.
musical performances where we just literally put up one microphone and stand around it and sing. So,
Crazier
but then
things have happened in New York City and in that cathedral.
exactly,
So you could.
we could. I'm also, we're going to be at Holy Name Cathedral in Chicago,
Yeah.
which will be,
Have you ever been in there?
no, I've never even been in it before.
It feels like a log cabin. I'm just going to say that. I got to give a talk there this past summer. And first of all, you're like in the cathedral that Pope Leo would have gone to as a kid. So that's kind of
Mhm.
cool. But the ceiling is like wood lattice. That's really the only way I know I don't know the architectural terms, but it feels very cozy. It's quite big. It's not as big as a St. Patrick's, which is just like this booming Gothic vision. And it feels very cozy. It feels very Chicago. It feels very Midwest. Where can people buy tickets? Because you guys are renting a bus and like driving all over America. How can people come to this concert?
Yeah, go to mattmarmusic.com/tour and there'll be all the infos there.
And then if people want to maybe bring this to their diocese in the future, do they
Yes.
reach out to your management? Like, how do they make that happen?
Yeah, there's if you email all the contact infos on my website, mattmarmusic.com.
We'll put a link over on the Substack for folks. Matt, thanks so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me.